Hi everybody, my name is Andy Couturier, and today's writing tip will be a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but it's important, and I think this is a question a lot of my students have. And the question is, how do you organize a longer piece of work, whether it's a long essay or maybe in your case a book, without necessarily setting up the entire outline first or being stuck to a rigid outline that doesn't organically shape itself to the material that you're writing. Okay, so this is an adaptation of a exercise in my book called Writing Open the Mind, which is called Game Board. And the idea is to use playfulness on your right side of your brain as well as logical analysis on the left side of your brain, combine them together and have an organic organization of your book after you've started writing. And the reason I think this is going to be useful, and I know it's useful because many of my students have started from like not knowing what they're going to write at all and moved all the way to a finished and published book using this method. A lot of them. So you can trust me, this works. I will say, if you just want a simple organization, you just want to do chronology, that's the simplest possible way. The second simplest possible way is that thing you learned in 7th grade or 9th grade about Roman numerals, right? You know, topic 1, subtopic 2, A, B, C, topic 3, A, B, C. That can be very rigid for a lot of people, and it often makes a boring book. So what you want to do is have some material written. Even though you don't know how it's going to be organized, you have to get started and have some pieces written. Maybe there's some other pieces you still want to write. Maybe you don't know what they are, but it's good to get going. So you're going to have to tolerate, let me repeat that, tolerate some unsureness, tolerate some ambiguity. It's a crucial foundational part of this. Okay, so again, this is an organizational method. I'm going to bring you through all steps of it. You can watch this video twice or 3 times if you need to see how it works. But the idea is you're going to use your playfulness, your experimentation mind, your child mind, as well as your logical, rational, linear mind to create a dynamic organization of your book that people will recognize as organized, but it will be organic and not rigid and mechanical. And you're going to do it in such a way that people want to keep reading your book, that they're not just going to read a chapter and put it down. Okay, so what the first step is to generate material. Generate just whatever comes up to you, whatever's interesting to you that day, maybe 1 page, maybe 3 pages, maybe 10 pages, just little pieces. And you don't have to worry, let me repeat that, you do not have to worry about whether that's going to go at the beginning, the middle, and the end yet. Now, I understand that that's going to be a little bit tough on some people's nervous system to not have it all rigidly set up. This is not like building a building. A building is an incredibly simple thing compared to a book. A book is complex and it's as rich and varied as the whole world. So once you've done that, I'm going to recommend that you print them out and maybe staple them together. All the different pieces you have. Now that's not necessarily the only step, only way to do it, but I just find that when you actually have something in hand, you can see it. Then you're going to want some index cards. Now for this video I have 3x5 index cards. I generally recommend 4x6 index cards. I just don't happen to have them with me here today. And then you're going to need a marker. Okay, and there's reasons for the size of the paper and there's reasons for the marker. So this is different than, say, a research paper where you're writing like long quotes down and you have like 50 words or 100 words per index card. This is different. You're going to want something that has a big bold line, and you're going to want to have a large canvas to write it on, and you're going to want to fill it up. And I will explain why later, but really get the right tools. This is a Sharpie. It's has a little bit of an off-gas, toxic. Sometimes I use it because I don't have another one. And I tend to like black or blue, but this is what I have, and sometimes you just go with what you have. But you can get a non-toxic version. I'm going to use, for an example, one of my students' projects, and she's right in the middle of it, and she's writing about an alternative health testing model. And that's it's a nonfiction book, but you can use this for a memoir. You can use this for a lot of different kinds of books. I'm just going to use this one because it's near at hand. So the large scan of what we're going to do is we're going to be generating cards, and on each card we're going to have 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 maximum words on each card, and then we're going to spread the cards out on this table, and then we're going to play with rearranging them until we find a sequence. That's the overview, but it's not quite enough to tell you how to do it. So I want to take you through step by step. Eventually, in the play and the experimentation and the use of the logical mind, we're going to put together a sequence which will be the outline of your book, based on what you've already written and about what based on what you already care about. Then you're going to try assembling the book together and reading it as a book. Then you'll probably make some shifts to your game board organization. Okay, so let's start with how, and this is really important, I found, how you use the language on the cards. Okay, so first of all, you want to fill up the whole card, and I use block capitals. And the reason for this is you may have 10 cards, but most people have 40, 50, 60 cards when they're generating something as large as a book. And this is not chapter by chapter. This might be segment by segment. This might be a little free write here. This might be a story there. This might be an explanation here. And you want to organize them and put them together in such a way that you're able to see them all at once. So if you have little tiny handwriting and you have 60 cards and it's way over there, you're not actually going to be able to read it. And that's what you're going to need to be able to do, is to be able to look at anywhere on your whole open table. And I should mention you will need a big open table, or if you prefer to work on a carpet on the floor, that's great. And you'll also need, once you have your cards done, a clear number of hours. Maybe 3 hours, maybe 6 hours, but you want to have, like, say, a Saturday morning where you've turned off all your devices, all your distractions, and you want to make it from the beginning to the end in one burst, because it's hard along the way to sort of stop and then get back to it again. Not impossible, and people sometimes do this with Post-it notes on the wall. I don't actually like Post-it notes very much. First of all, they fall off and they're a little flimsier and they're smaller, so I really think index cards, and again, I think 3 by 5 can work, but 4 by 6 is better. Okay, so once again, let me repeat that part. Big thick marker, white index card, no lines. Now, how do you language this? I'm going to read one of them to you. How acupuncture meridians work in the body. How acupuncture meridians work in the body. So for my student, this is enough to remind her what piece of writing this refers to. This is not for something she's going to write. You could have some for what you're going to write, but let's stick with things that you've already written. She started my book completion group 6 or 8 weeks ago. I encouraged her to generate a lot of material. Now she has some pieces. So for each individual piece, she's going to have a card, right? And the thing about it is it's descriptive enough that she knows what it is. It's not, so if her whole book is about energy meridians and testing, every card can't just be like energy and testing, because that's not specific enough. It needs to be concrete, specific enough, but it doesn't have to mean anything to somebody else, as long as you know what it means. So when Sarah left me. If I would write a piece about when Sarah left me, and I know who Sarah is, and I know what that's about, and I know that that only represents one piece of writing, it's good enough. Okay, so let's go through some more, right? 90-year-old client with intestinal problem. So I ran out of space, PROB. But 90-year-old client with intestinal problems. So again, I go to the piece of writing, I think of what's most descriptive of what this is, what's in the piece, or what the piece does, what the piece accomplishes. And when I say piece, again, it could be just like a paragraph or two, or it could be 2 or 3 pages. When you start getting into 10 pages, there's too many different things going on. So I'm going to encourage you to break it up into 2 or 3, unless you're absolutely certain that all 10 of those pages need to stay together in that order. Okay, this is, the next one is imperfections of traditional lab test. Imperfections of traditional lab test. So this is a more essayistic section compared to the 90-year-old client with intestinal problems, which is more of a story. This is more of an explanation. These things can be mixed, and often in good nonfiction books they are mixed. Speaking of imperfections, you might notice that my handwriting is not beautiful, or at least I feel that. doesn't matter. I've written 4 books now, and I've used this method a lot. So it doesn't, we all live with our imperfections, and I'm displaying my 3rd grade handwriting proudly on YouTube to you now to give you permission to do it whatever way you can. Okay, here is another story. Physicist who says energy medicine is hogwash. Physicist who, 1, 2, says energy for medicine is 6, hogwash, 7 words. That's a nice number. Again, if you start writing 20 words on it, difficult to see from far away, difficult to know what the piece is about. I also like this particularly because it's physicist and hogwash, right? This is like, they're very kind of crunchy words. There's a lot of specificity. Not technically necessary. And you'll notice that I am not putting them down in any way at all. I'm just tossing them out there. That's going to be an important part of this. My own health problem and doing research. So if my student wanted to be more technical, she could have written a lot more, what the health problem was and what kind of research she did and what the result of it was. But this is enough to remind her what the topic of the specific pieces, and that's plenty. So I have 5 here, but as you generate more material, you're going to have a lot. This is obviously not enough for a book. So this is good. We're going to move to the second phase, but remember, just to remind you, specific, short, big block capitals, and 1 per card. Okay, don't try to stick 20 things, because the whole cool thing about this is you're going to be able to move things around, and you're going to have them consort with each other or cohabitate with each other. So I'm putting a bunch of blank cards out, but in your case, these will all be cards that will have writing on them, and each one will refer to a piece that you have already written. Now, what if as you're going along, you're like, oh, I remember, I want to write a piece about how muscle testing is misunderstood. I haven't written it, so I might make a mark, like a little asterisk, and I might write muscle testing is misunderstood. Muscle testing. Just some little mark so I know that that's something I need to write. But again, you want to be specific. And again, the more you can generate first, the better. So a lot of times when people start getting more than 20 pieces and they don't have an organization for it, they start to get a little nervous. They get worried that it's going to be a big mess. And that's what this method is, to help keep this mess under control and still have a dynamic, organic organization. Okay, so this is going to be enough for this example here, but I want to say, you may have the whole table full. And just for example, my book, The Abundance of Less, just came out last year. The last chapter, I was partly about myself and partly about the world situation and partly about the people I wrote about in the book and partly about my own journey in my childhood, and I had to put it together in such a way that it would be an interesting read, and this is exactly how I did it. Okay, so let's assume that you've got all the parts and pieces, and if you don't have every last one there, that's fine, because you're just trying to start making a structure. Next step is you're going to do, you can either start with like, what would be an interesting way to start? What would be a surprising way to start? Well, my own health problem and doing research. Well, that certainly is a personal way to start, and it might bring people in to have, like, maybe that's the first chapter in the book. But the point is it's experimental. We're just trying it out. We're playing. We're invoking that child mind of like, well, let's try it this way, and let's try it this way. Well, this would be fun. Oh, I don't know. Let's mess it up again. That is going to be helpful to you. And again, you need enough time to do it. So you think, okay, that's a way to start, and maybe I'll kind of put the things that are towards the beginning over here and things that are towards the end over here. I don't know, but I'm just moving them around. And then you think, well, it is a good way to start, and many people do talk personally, but maybe I would like a different kind of emphasis. Maybe I'd like to talk about a client, the 90-year-old client with intestinal problems. Well, that's sort of less focused on me, so maybe that's an interesting place, and I could juxtapose those two together. So let me say something about this. This is the playful part. You're putting them together. You're like, that'd be interesting to have it flow this way. Might have it interesting to flow that way. And you may be, okay, these two are going together here. but wait a minute, here's this part about the physicist who says energy medicine is hogwash. Well, that would be a kind of provocative way to start. So instead of making it a gentle beginning, maybe I'm kind of feeling a little ornery and I want to say, like, okay, so here's a person who strongly disagrees with me, and I actually feel a little upset that this person said this, and hogwash is such a, accusatory word, but at least it acknowledges that the writer understands that this is a controversial position and it puts it front and center, right? So maybe that's an interesting place to start. Okay, so and then maybe you get, say, 3 or 4 together. This is an interesting subplot here, these 3 together, but I'm not sure where they'll go. So I'm going to put them over here together and move these around, and I'm just scanning with my eyes. So this is the mindset part, and it's actually important to have an open mind, to have an experimental mind, to understand that it can be fun and interesting to try to create a structure of writing that draws people in, promotes curiosity, gets them to keep reading, because you don't want them to put the book down. The whole point is to keep them curious, to keep them interested. And as you create structure, okay, these 3 are over here, and I put these 2 here. And this is the magic part. Like, what if I put these 2 together with these 3? I never even thought these could go together, but actually, once I put them together, it actually creates a dynamism between the 2 of them. Okay, so I've got these 5, but does it go at the beginning, at the end? That's the playful part, and that's the part that's going to take some time. And that's the part where you need to be patient with yourself and interested in the process. Okay, so you're going to do that for a while, and you're going to get to a provisional answer, a provisional organization. I'm going to repeat the word provisional. It doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be right. It's just what is going to work for now. Now, what if you get stuck? Well, let me say, it's going to work for now. You get a structure, and at some point they'll be lined up in a row. It can't be a big mass because a book is, in the end, a linear thing. It starts at the beginning and it goes all the way to the end. So you actually have to, in the end, get it to one after the other, after the other, after the other. Once you do that, then you're going to type that up, and then you're going to start gluing the pieces of writing into the new document. But I'm going to talk to you about how to do that in a second. I want to give you 2 principles for this organization, and they're both embodied in 2 quotes, which I will repeat. One is text structure is about the arousal and fulfillment of desire. Text structure is about the arousal and fulfillment of desire. That's by a linguist, an early 20th century linguist named I.A. Richards. And the second one is desire is the presence of an absence. And that's Jean-Paul Sartre. I'll repeat that. Desire is the presence, capital P, of an absence, capital A. Desire is the presence of an absence. So those 2 together, if you put them together, you'll see that creating people's excitement to read is by provoking this desire in them to find out what happens next, or where you're going, or what the implications are. So as you're organizing these pieces, you want to think about what will provoke their curiosity, their desire to read forward, the absence that they feel inside to lean into the next piece, and what will text structure is about the arousal and fulfillment of desire. So you can't just provoke a bunch of questions. You've seen books like this, right? You get too lost, you don't know what's going, you don't have any sense of it. That's not going to be good. But if you don't provoke enough, that's also boring. Oh yeah, I read the whole first chapter and I know exactly where this is going. I have no more interest in reading it. So it's finding the sweet spot between the too many questions and not enough questions. So it's a kind of leapfrogging. So you provoke something, you fulfill it partially. While you're fulfilling it, you're provoking something else, provoking another question, provoking another curiosity, getting the reader to keep reading. So you hold these concepts of arousal and fulfillment of desire, and desire is the presence of an absence, as you're organizing these books. Okay, these chunks of writing. And again, a chunk of writing could be a paragraph long, could be 2 pages, could be 4 or 5 pages, could be a story, could be an explanation, could be a theoretical piece. Finally, you're going to have all of your sections together, and they're going to be in a order. Maybe it's going down this way, right? Just be clear on what that is. Then, next step, you are going to open up a fresh document in your word processor. I like to use Microsoft Word. And you're going to type each of these in with maybe 4 or 5 spaces between them. Okay? So, let's say this is my organization here. And this is the first part of the book, and this is the end part of the book. Again, provisional. I may change it. I may add something. I may write a new piece. It's going to go in here later. But for right now, this is my provisional organization of my book. I type it in all caps. That's how I do it. So I have a blank document. I start with physicist who says energy medicine is hogwash. Type that in. 5 spaces. Next one, next one, next one. Once I've got that whole thing, I say provisional outline, whatever today's date is, or name of the book. Next step, save as. So you save that and print it out. So you can actually carry it with you when you're waiting in a doctor's office, or you have a few minutes in the morning when you're drinking your coffee, and you're going to kind of keep looking at it and just get your mind used to this organization. Don't keep rechanging it every 10 seconds. Just go with it. Say, listen, I gave myself 4 or 5 hours or 4 hours on Sunday morning 2 weeks ago. It looked good enough. Okay? So, save as, and then you take all of these different documents, these different chunks of writing, and you start gluing it into your outline. Step by step, gluing it in, and then you save that and you print that. I'm really a big fan of not just seeing things on the screen. You miss a lot on the screen. And the other thing is, screen's this big, whereas a printed thing, you can see a lot more of it at the time. And this allows you to see chunk by chunk how they're relating to each other, as well as the whole outline, the whole book as it flows through. So then you print it out, and that's the first draft, maybe the rough first draft of your book. You may find that you want to write about this, you want to write about that. In fact, if you do this very early in the process, you may find that you'll have to write a lot more and maybe do another game board. But for the time being, let's assume that you have most of the chunks there, maybe a few things. Then you read the book and you see how it flows. Again, seeing whether there's things that wrap back around, that give people a sense of structure. And I think that'll be the last thing I will say about giving people a sense of structure. Reintroduce things. So if I start with a physicist who says energy medicine is hogwash, maybe it'd be interesting to bring him in again in the middle, and then almost at the end, or a bunch of times, and then kind of bring in different physicists, and maybe show that there's controversy in the world of physics about energy medicine, or just different ways. And it's going to evolve as you go along. But the main thing is to try to be tolerant of some ambiguity, not knowing what's going on, learning about it, and giving it time. That's maybe my last point. If you keep applying time to it, and you don't wait 6 months or even 3 weeks between if you have to, but as much as possible, trying to condense the amount of time you're working on it to a shorter period of time, so you're not like, oh, what was it I was writing about and I can't remember this. Try to keep it together and read through it, and then you mark it up on your document, and then you'll put it together, and you'll say, oh, you know what, really, imperfections of the traditional lab test has to go first. So maybe I reorganize it. I put it in both my outline document and in the new version of the book. And you iterate this process, and once you feel like you've done it several times, maybe you need to write transitions, maybe you have some extra pieces, then maybe you show it to a sympathetic reader. Well, that'll be a different video on how to choose a good sympathetic reader. But I think for the time being, that's enough to get you started. And I always welcome your questions. And by the way, if you've never taken a class with me, I welcome you. We have online classes as well as in-person classes. And all of that is listed at theopening.org. Thanks for joining me today. Bye-bye.